Welcome everyone to the Pantheon. I'm Ray Skunberg, and today we're looking at WHIH. It's a webisode series, and we're also going to be looking at the timeline of the MCU as it pertains to this period of time. Because it's a web series, it's kind of short, very short actually, so we're going to include a little bit more information on this portion. We're going to my partner Evie in a little bit, but I'm going to break down what we're talking about because this is not something we normally would usually cover, and it's sort of important just to kind of give you some backstory. It's a web series, not too different from the one-shots. The one-shots were individual short stories, independent onto their own. They existed primarily in Phase 1. They were backstories to help kind of give some extra connective tissues to the films, whether it's Incredible Hulk, whether it's the Avengers movie, whether, just Iron Man, Captain America. There were short stories that were embedded into the MCU, and it ended it off at the end of the Battle of New York, because then we get into Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Coulson Resurrection. So that's where they begin and end. This goes back to the roots of a web series as connective tissues to the MCU. So, reason why I bring up this is because the way they differ a little bit is just in terms of the narrative. The narrative of the WHIH is a singular thought, whereas the one-shots, as the word progresses, one-shots meaning an individual story onto its own. So, the ones I want to focus on in terms of one-shots is the last two. They're directed by Louis D'Esposito. He is the co-CEO of Marvel Studios, so he's the right-hand man to Kevin Feige, to making the big roles of the Marvel films and the cinematic universe as a whole. But he directed Item 47 and Agent Carter, and my focus is on Agent Carter because at the end of that, we get a phone call from Howard Stark promoting her as being the lead or the head or to run the SSR, so all the operatives now answer to her. Now, if that's canon, which it is, we now fast forward to 1989. This is the flashback we get with Ant-Man. It's also where we learn that the Triskelion, which is the base of S.H.I.E.L.D., I guess to the international world, because Howard Stark has built the Triskelion, and we look at the building in its final stages. So I would imagine that by 1989, near the end of the year, the Triskelion was completed and completely built. And at the head of the table, we have Howard Stark and Peggy Carter as the people who run S.H.I.E.L.D., which is the name it is now known at this time. On the head table, we have the head of defense, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s defense, that was Mitchell Carlson, played by Martin Donovan. And in the flashback, Hank Pym quits. So now we fast forward to 1991, okay, and December 16th, 1991 specifically. That's the flashback we get in Civil War. That's when we learn the death of Howard Stark, him and his wife, Maria Stark, at the hands of Winter Soldier. And then we fast forward 1 year from there, we get to 1992 in Oakland, California, with the assassination of Prince Najabu, who is the brother of King T'Chaka. He dies at the hands of his brother because of him giving secrets out of the location of Wakanda and vibranium to Ulysses Claw, and that's considered treasonous in itself. And that's kind of a stain on the consciousness of King T'Chaka. That is what we learn in these periods of time. Now, what does all of this mean to what I'm talking about now? Okay, so going back to our webisode. So WHIH, in contrast, it really is like the CNN of the news media. Now, we live in a world post-Trump administration, so when I say CNN, it kind of is diversive and polarizing. But think of CNN back in the 1980s, back when it was just formed, and it was an international news field. It was the international news for the international world, both for the nation as well. But when you think of CNN, you think of an objective, a source of news outlet, and where you have Walter Cronkite kind of level of integrity, where this is the news as it unfolds and we're telling you how it is. And so they're going to the level of the Walter Cronkite early 1980s CNN. So when I say CNN on the world, I mean untainted by subjective perspective, untainted by political views or lobbyists, just the news in its purest form. And they tell the news as it develops. Now, of course, in the in WHIH, they do speculate some corrosion or corruption because of the corporation that sponsors WHIH, which I'll get into shortly. Okay, so let's get to what is WHIH. It's a news station, it's a news affiliate. They're located in on all aspects of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, both television and in film. You can see them on Marvel Netflix, you can see them on Freeform with Cloak and Dagger, you see them with the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., as well as scenes or segments in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So they're sprinkled throughout the MCU, both television and in film. And so if you want to put this in another context, think of Looney Tunes and Acme. Acme is the thing that exists throughout all the sketches. They're the go-to device. Well, WHIH is like the Acme from Marvel. They exist basically whenever there's a news media outlet, they're there. Whenever there is a bad guy or advertisement or something, you get rocks on. But like for the news outlet, you have WHIH, and that's what they do. So who's in it? In this case, we have we have Christine Everhart, played by Leslie Bibb. You will see her from Iron Man 1 and 2. She is the reporter who's there at the media scrum when Tony Stark comes out and says, "I am Iron Man." And she is there at the anchor that's now promoted, I guess, since that event, to be the anchor of WHIH, and she goes into talks about a profile piece. Now, where does this whole thing exist? Well, this exists just before the events of Ant-Man. So this is used as a vehicle to promote and to show some connective tissues to the film Ant-Man. Season 2 is used more as a tissue or a connective tissue or a showpiece to promote Civil War. So this one is primarily a single narrative story dedicated to get you up to speed and give you some background information on the characters for Ant-Man. It's things that are not in the movie and will help illuminate some aspects of the characters and where the mindset is of everybody going into this movie. So let's get into this film. So what we're seeing in this particular segment of newscast, it exists between July 2nd to July 16th. And the reason why I say the 16th is because on July 17th is what they're promoting, the release of Scott Lang, which also coincides with the release of the movie Ant-Man to the world. Ant-Man's released worldwide on July 17th, 2015. And Scott Lang's release from San Quentin prison is July 17th, 2015. So let's get into why he's there. They're feeling an obligation to right or wrong. He did like a Robin Hood choice. And he broke into the president of VistaCorp at his home, hacked into his computer, and allocated the funds back to each and every individual who VistaCorp kind of overcharged. And that was a total of $4 million. And so what we're seeing are basically what that was, and then they're trying to investigate they have an interview with Scott Lang live from San Quentin to get his side of the story. Now, keeping in mind too that VistaCorp is also part owner of WHIH, so there is a bit of a bias, but that's something neither here nor there to discuss. But like that's kind of a comedic edge, I would say. But anyways, to hear more on this, because I'm going too long, let's hear my partner Effie and hear his thoughts of Scott Lang's philosophical point of view of VistaCorp and his crime.
I don't know. Actually, that's very puzzling for me because, he must have been really grown up well, like to actually give the money back. Mm-hmm. Something you've never, unless like the guy's a really bad man. Right. Yeah, I thought that was, that actually was a good kind thing, good thing that usually nice people do, and after like the funds have been taken, you would have thought that the guy would have gone somewhere with them instead of giving them back, which is cool. Right. What's your aspect on that?
Well, keeping in mind too, he said not all the money was given back to the clients. Some of it was service charges, so he kind of kept some for himself. But overall, I think you should keep in mind too that Scott Lang. It's imperative to think of Scott Lang as someone who is likable and redeemable. Yeah. Because if he wasn't considered that, the film of Ant-Man wouldn't work. Let's be honest. There had to been. You could see a person who is a good guy at heart, and that is showcased to you when after doing his 3 years term out of his 5-year sentence in San Quentin, he is driven, if you say, to reconcile with his daughter Cassie, because she's 8 years old, and last time he saw her she was 5. So he's missed out a lot of the crucial moments of her life, and he wants to be there as the father.
Right. Yeah.
And so that is a endeavor, a quality of a man who's willing to go work at Baskin Robbins, to do anything it takes to get back into the graces of his daughter and be there. So that's amazing in itself. It's also important to showcase the villains in this too.
Okay. Right.
We get Darren Cross, played by Corey Stoll. We get his backstory, because in the film you don't understand his motivation, where he's from, how much of a threat he really is, and we learn that through an interview on Wired Insider with James Rondell, who interviews him on a one-on-one. He was handpicked from Hank Pym himself, graduating MIT valedictorian in his class. Pym had him as his protege in Pym Industries, and as such, he went on to become the CEO. The problem with the Darren Cross's character that Rondell points out is that his company hasn't done anything new since he's taken over as CEO. They haven't really moved the needle in terms of advancements. That is until today, when until he makes the announcement that Pym Industries has something revolutionary. Rondell does talk about what happened to Hank Pym. Unfortunately, or fortunately, Darren Cross pushed his mentor out. Like, he voted him out, along with his daughter Hope. They were able to get the votes to knock Hank Pym out and for him to take over as CEO. So that's kind of a gray cloud over Darren Cross's head that doesn't get spoken about too much. And so when we hear that, what's your thoughts?
Oh, for sure, no doubt. That's something you would see on like a soap opera or something,
Oh, I agree. Totally understand what you mean.
Jack and Victor from the Y&R. Yeah, I used to watch it, but one pushing like another out, so or just that grasp of power, it can make you do funny stuff. But that new style WHIH is pretty cool. It's short, maybe 5-10 minutes, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and just to end off on, I mean, this show is really it is a newscast, and WHIH feels like a legitimate newscast. It has a ticker tape at the bottom showing you stories, stock market fluctuations, what's going on. There's a feed going on telling you the various stories that's happening of the day. For example, there's a drought happening in California, which is things that can occur, and it's not just things that happen with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It feels like a legitimate story. The way the music bed comes in, the visual graphics, the look of it, the all the cutaways, just the overall, like a high class, top notch news. With that, I'm Ray.
I'm Evie.
We'll talk to you next week.